Today's episode is sponsored by Kai Scissors. Kai Scissors are the premier sewing, quilting, tailoring, and craft scissors available today. Made of hardened stainless steel, they are smooth, light, and offer fatigue-free cutting for all of your cutting needs. Kai Manufacturing has been making quality cutting blades for over 100 years. So remember, all orders on kaiscissors.com, that's K-A-I scissors.com, have free shipping inside the United States. Visit them at kaiscissors.com today. Thank you so much, Kai Scissors. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 147 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today, we're talking about running an indie sewing pattern business with my guest, Taylor McVay. Taylor is a designer, artist, and educator. She creates sewing patterns for unique architecture-inspired garments under the name Blueprints for Sewing. Along with running Blueprints, Taylor teaches fashion design, pattern making, and sewing in the Boston area. Along with teaching and designing patterns, Taylor creates one-of-a-kind garments, experiments with techniques like weaving and embroidery, and loves to repurpose and recycle textiles. She spends a lot of her time thinking, writing, and talking about slow fashion. And Taylor lives not too far from me, so I'm excited she was able to come to Wellesley and spend some time with me today in my studio. So Taylor McVay, welcome, and thank you for coming to visit me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice when people can come and actually see me here in Wellesley.
Excellent. You have a beautiful studio. It's very inspiring.
Yay. So I'd love to start off, if we could, with you telling us the story of a dress that you made from some scarves that you thrifted when you were maybe 12 or 13. And I think it was maybe all hand sewn. I'm not sure, but maybe you made it on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And it was like the dress that started it all. So tell us about that.
My dad will be so happy to hear this. So I was always a kid who just like made stuff constantly. The usual doll clothes, things like that. I remember making very elaborate sets for the dolls too out of cereal boxes and wallpaper scraps. And so my parents were really keen on this. And one year, as you are when you're 12, 13, you sort of want to be doing your own thing, but you're still kind of tagging along with your parents. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to go to this, grown-ups New Year's Eve party, I want to wear something fun and cool and make it. So I asked my dad to take me down to this little vintage shop that was in our town that I've been going to since I was a little kid. It's like one of my earliest clothing shopping memories, which is probably pretty formative in terms of the adult that I am today. And they always had this huge bin full of scarves. So I asked him to take me down there. I raided the scarf bin. I bought maybe, 12 printed silk and nylon scarves and brought them home and decided I was making myself a dress. So I took all these scarves and an old t-shirt to use for the top, and I borrowed a guitar case from my dad. My dad's a musician, and I kind of used the guitar case as a makeshift dress form because I was a very skinny child that was a little more curvy on the bottom, so it was the perfect shape. And I sort of just, wrapped it around the guitar case and stitched it together, a little handkerchief hem, all these really cool, 60s and 70s floral print scarves. And I remember being very proud of it. It was kind of one of my first garment that I ever made, which is kind of a big deal because that's what I'm obsessed with to this day.
And so did you wear it to the party?
I totally did, and I got a lot of compliments. It was kind of a... my mom was in the film industry, so it was kind of like a fancy film industry party, and I remember there was some actress that they told me, oh, she came up and she's like, where did your daughter get that dress? I have to have one. And I was like, I made it. So
that's so cute. So what did your parents do for work? Your dad was a musician and your mom was in the film industry. What exactly were they doing?
So my mom was on a pretty well-known TV show in the 80s called Fame, which was about a performing arts high school. She was one of the main characters. She's also been a director and she's been a writer and did theater and film and things like that. She put together a movie, or she produced a movie a couple years ago, directed a movie rather, and she's done all kinds of cool things in theater and film. And my dad is a musician, a guitar player, and a singer-songwriter, a folk singer for my whole life, but has spent the last couple of years teaching middle school music. And he's also in the process of promoting this book that he wrote about teaching music from the right brain. So instead of a more theoretical approach, one that's based on patterns and learning it by doing it. So there's a lot of art and creativity and teaching and all of that stuff in my family. So that's definitely...
And did you have siblings?
I did. I have a half brother. I have two half brothers. And I have one full brother, and they're all younger than me, so I've got 3 little brothers.
Oh, wow, that's great. Okay, so it sounds like you had a lot of creativity encouraged in your house and a lot of teaching as well as part of your life.
Yeah, it was absolutely a house that encouraged any kind of creative experimentation, both for me and my brother. My brother ended up getting into construction and is sort of studying to be an architect. So it's kind of that same making things. There's always a lot of making things. My mom would craft things and cook, and my dad would build furniture and do, music and theater and all those kinds of things. So it's a very encouraging household in that way.
Yeah. And so when you decided to go to art school, that was totally okay. Oh, it was not a rebellious move.
Totally. And my parents were really supportive of it, and I really feel very privileged and appreciative of the fact that they really encouraged me to pursue art. I mean, I don't think they really had a choice. It was kind of the thing I was pretty set on doing, but I'm glad that they were so supportive of me in the process.
Okay. And before that happened, you did learn to sew. I mean, that first dress was the first one, but then you did get a sewing machine. It sounds like your dad was supportive, got you a sewing machine. And were you making things in high school?
Absolutely. When I was in high school, my antidote to sort of the trappings of popularity in middle school meanness was to go very heavily into sort of a punk rock DIY existence. So when I was a teenager, I was very much kind of in the punk thing, loved the music, and made a lot of my clothes, where it was a place where making your clothes was cool and it was interesting versus, the middle school and high school where I went to where it was sort of looked down upon, right? Because it was, a little bit almost let me think of how to phrase this. So it was it was a good school, right? I was kind of academically inclined, so I was at a school that was a little bit more academically rigorous and had, a lot of students who were come from wealthy families. And so the whole making your own clothes thing was sort of looked down upon, and the sort of punk community was a lot more receptive to that. And so I have great pictures of some of the outfits I whipped up when I was in that time period. I went to a lot of thrift stores. I refashioned and repurposed things. And I did from scratch sew some of my own clothes too. But that was a thread throughout, even though I was sort of thinking about being an artist, right, with a capital A, and I painted and I did all of that kind of stuff. Making clothing was an art form that really kind of took me through a time, and also took me through was kind of a challenging time in middle school and high school, as it is for most people.
Yeah, totally. Okay. And so you went to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, is that right, in Boston, which I love.
Yeah.
And so you're here in my house, and I haven't taken you on a full tour, but we collect art. And
nice.
The way that we began was going to the museum school sale in November.
Awesome,
and my husband and I bought a painting there together when we were dating.
Cool.
And then I thought to myself, gosh, if we break up, what's going to happen to the painting?
Who gets custody of
I know, who gets custody. Thankfully, we stayed together. And so every year, instead of buying each other a holiday present, we buy we buy a piece of art for the house.
That's cool.
At the sale, which we love that sale. Anyway, it's a wonderful school. So did you have a good experience there?
I did. I loved it, and I've heard from people that it's changed a little bit. I don't really know anyone who goes there now except for people in graduate school.
I think it's part of Tufts.
It's part of Tufts
now.
officially. Yeah. It always had a relationship with Tufts. I took classes at Tufts when I was there, but now I think it's really been wrapped into Tufts in a more included way. I don't really know how to put it, but it's definitely like it's one school now versus being this sort of separate satellite entity. I had a wonderful time. I found it to be very open. It really suited my experimental nature. There were not a lot, the boundaries were very loose in terms of the classes you were taking and the professors, the teachers. I had a lot of engagement with them, and I would kind of see them outside of school and go to their openings. It all felt very organic and really encouraged a lot of conceptual thinking and experimentation and working in mediums that I hadn't really considered when I was younger. I came in as a painter, and I left having mostly focused on video installation and performance arts. So, it definitely kind of opened up my mind, and it also got me thinking a lot about, I love traditional art mediums a lot because I'm a crafts person.
Right.
But there was also something about the conceptual and the art theory that I studied that really got me thinking about art as a lens to view the world, right? And how we can kind of use art to make sense of things and to think about history or politics or whatever. And, I feel like I still think that way. But in a way, I've sort of shifted the lens from art to fashion. And how do we look at all kinds of different things kind of through the lens of fashion?
That's super cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really neat. All right. So you graduated, and then do they teach you anything about business? That's
God,
always the question, right? Like, I feel like maybe that's a hole in some MFA programs or undergraduate art programs where they're not really having so much of a focus on how to turn this into a business and get a job.
It's true. I feel like there were resources at the school. I don't want to deny that. There were definitely resources at the school, but there wasn't like a class that you had to take.
Yeah, like a part of the core curriculum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could have benefited from just like a, business class for artists. And I remember even there was some talk about that either when I was there or after when my husband was in graduate school there, and just hearing that a little bit, we should be teaching
It's not
people
sexy,
this.
and maybe people don't want to use some of their credits that way, but...
Yeah, and I think maybe it's... I would not be surprised if they offered it now, because I feel like a sort of the entrepreneurial spirit of things now and the way we kind of view work and business and creativity is very different than it was when I was in college. And, when I was there was still a lot of this, you're an artist who makes work that goes in a gallery and you get discovered and all this stuff. So
and now it's very direct to market,
exactly.
direct to audience,
Exactly. So I think I definitely could have benefited from some more practical knowledge. But I think what I did take away was a really deep connection to the process of art making and a lot of conviction about it. And so that I think helped me struggle through some of the hurdles involved in later when I'd go on to start a business or trying to make money off of my art.
Okay. So you came out, got some jobs. It sounds like a couple of different interesting jobs that kind of put you through almost second layer of education.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that phase that kind of led up to founding your own business.
So after college, I graduated with an art degree, and it's funny. I was like, what am I going to do for work? I'd worked retail through most of college. Again, I've always been a clothes person. I've always loved clothing. So I worked at a bunch of different clothing stores in college. I worked in their display departments. I did visual merchandising. I did display fabrication. And so I did that for a while. I kind of dabbled in those areas. And eventually I got kind of sick of the more corporate work culture. I was working for big companies like Anthropologie, which are creatively very interesting, but in the inner workings, very, very corporate and very structured and, pointed. So I kind of found my way to smaller boutiques, which was really enriching because you sort of get to see how the business is run in a real way, and it's just one or two people kind of running a small business. So I got a bit of a crash course in small business stuff from working at a vintage boutique after college, where I was basically an assistant manager. I bought inventory, I managed it, I ran the shop most days.
And this is in Boston?
This was in Boston. It was on Jamaica Plain. It's no longer, a shop is no longer in business, but it was really awesome when it was there, and she had beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
We'd go on buying trips, and I'd buy stuff consignment. And the other thing I did was I did the alterations. So I spent a lot of time looking at the inner workings of vintage clothing, which if you've ever kind of taken apart vintage clothing, you learn some incredible things about how garments are put together, right? And I also did alterations. So people would come in and they would buy something vintage and I'd tailor it to fit them. So I learned a lot about fitting to people's bodies, and I also learned a lot about just how things were constructed and about textiles and all these beautiful things. And I learned a lot about fashion history that way as well. And at this time when I was working at the vintage store, I also had, because I'd been sewing for such a long time, it sort of became my fallback after art school, right? What am I going to do for money? I sort of fell back on my sewing skills, which is interesting. And along with working at this vintage boutique doing alterations, I also started taking on custom clothing clients. So I would meet people, I left my card at several fabric shops and places in the area and at the boutique where I worked, because people need alterations. It's a common thing, I think, that people are in search for. I still, to this day, will get people sending me a random email. My friend needs a wedding dress hemmed, or, needs a bridesmaid dress fitted, or needs some pants tailored or something. I still get those emails to this day. It's something that I feel like is not as available culturally as it once was, when a lot of things were custom made.
Yeah.
So people, there's a demand for it. So I started this little custom clothing business, and it kind of picked up. And I did all kinds of different things. I did, your typical wedding and bridesmaid type things. I also made just casual clothing for people that couldn't find what they wanted. And, I had one great client that I had for a couple of years that just brought me beautiful fabric, and we had a couple different styles of blouse that I made for her. Another woman who had these jackets that she loved to have just to wear. And so I would customize these jackets for her, button-up shirts, all kinds of different things.
Okay.
So that was kind of another way that I kind of built up my chops. I did some film costumes on hire, on contract, all kinds of different things.
Right. All right. So you were learning about clothing, learning about clients, learning about business, learning about a lot of different things.
Pricing things. How do I charge for things? Contracts was a tough lesson to learn.
Oh, yes.
So, only had one big snafu with that, unfortunately. So, doing that and working in the vintage boutique kind of was a big time period where I really learned a lot about fitting, about constructing clothing for people, got really inspired by vintage, and sort of learned some of those lessons about running a business in that way.
And then you started teaching. And it sounds like teaching is what really led you into having your own pattern business.
Absolutely.
And so you were teaching at JP Knit and Stitch, which is funny because when I read that as I was preparing to talk with you today, it was funny. I just taught a class last week at JP Knit and Stitch. And I was like, awesome. That's funny. But my class was about Etsy, about setting up an Etsy shop. But I was just there. And it's under new ownership probably from the time that you began teaching there. But it's still a very beautiful shop.
It's a great shop.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. That was my other kind of formative post-college retail, small business. I spent a lot of time not only teaching there, but working for the owners and doing all kinds of things, merchandising, windows, the same kinds of things I was doing in my retail job. But, with the owners who were very wonderful and transparent and remain, one of whom remains like a really good friend to this day, learned so much just about all the things that go into running a small business, marketing, inventory, all of these different things. And so I actually started by teaching there, and I was a little scared of teaching when I first started doing it. I'll talk more about that in a little bit if we get into it. But that was a place where I really got my foundational teaching chops. And started to gain a lot of confidence in that skill set, which I found came pretty naturally to me, and it's something that brings me a tremendous amount of joy. And so in that place, it was kind of working the small business angle. Eventually, I ended up working in the shop as well, and working in a pretty serious capacity when I was living in JP. Along with teaching classes.
And what worried you about teaching? I mean, teaching is I mean, I'm that's my formal training. So I have a master's degree in education, and I worked as a teacher. That's the one thing I do have formal training in.
Yeah, totally.
Not all the rest of it I've made up as I went along. So that's funny. But so what was I mean, you do have formal training in actually in art and in making, and so I'm wondering what made you nervous about teaching.
So, to be pretty frank, a lot of it is social anxiety, which I've spent a lot of my life managing anxiety and figuring out ways to work with it. And so a big component of it was just getting comfortable putting myself out there in front of people.
I think you're not alone in that. I mean, I think a lot of people who work, well, in many industries, but certainly in our industry, do really suffer from social anxiety and worry about that and that really can hold you back from plunging into teaching or from speaking at conferences.
Totally,
and
absolutely.
And we can talk about this later, but even from putting yourself out there on social media as 100%, well.
100%. And that's it. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that later because that's definitely something that I think about a lot.
Yeah.
So, part of it was just my anxiety that I struggle with on my own. Another part of it is, I was in my very early 20s and hadn't really done a lot of that putting myself out there to begin with, but I had some training for it in my retail experience. So when I started teaching, I kind of channeled my customer service brain, which was, I think, probably a way that a coping mechanism I'd kind of built for social anxiety, right? Because when you have trouble with anxiety, you sort of figure out these ways to move through the world. And one of the ways was like, okay, if I'm in a job and I have a particular thing that I need to do for a customer, it's not about me. So you can kind of take yourself out of the equation. Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like a performance. You're sort of performing an identity.
Right. Which you had performance art.
Exactly. So it came naturally. That was one of the ways that I kind of worked with my anxiety growing up most of my life, but a lot in my early 20s was having these sort of personas where I felt empowered and I felt like I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And I had ease with people. And so as I was working retail in the shop and really felt a lot of ownership over it because I really cared about the shop and enjoyed working there, and also teaching these classes, it kind of gave me a lot of confidence that I lacked earlier in my life. It helped me kind of build confidence. And when I meet people who are getting interested in teaching and they feel like, oh, I'm nervous about teaching, I don't think I'm going to be good at it, I always encourage them that it's going to be scary, but to give it a try because in a lot of cases, it's a really good way to build confidence and to get comfortable with like speaking in front of people and all of those sorts of things. Doesn't mean you're not going to be nervous ever. I was nervous coming in here today, but I have tools to kind of deal with it. You know what I mean?
Right. I wanted to take a minute now to talk a little bit about our sponsor, Kai Scissors. I own a pair of Kai scissors, and they are the preferred blade in my sewing room. I absolutely love them. And so here are some things that you might not know about Kai scissors. First of all, they are smooth, strong, and sharp to the tip, and that is definitely true. The 5000 series are hardened stainless steel, and the metal allows them to be strong and hold their edge, and then take a new edge when the time comes. All Kai scissors can be sharpened by any local reputable sharpener. I actually haven't even taken mine to be sharpened yet because they are still sharp after over a year of using them. The 7000 series are made of high carbon hardened stainless steel, and the carbon part is key. These are Kai's flagship scissors. The carbon allows the scissors to be harder, stronger, and sharper. And sharper means that they can put a steeper angled edge on the cutting blades. Steeper equals sharper. Steeper also means a thinner edge. If you put a sharper, thinner edge on any scissors, the edge is brittle and wears out really quickly. Having the carbon, though, keeps that from happening. What does sharper mean to you, the sewer? Sharper means it's easier to cut things out. We hear cuts like butter all the time. This is coming from Jeff over at Kai Scissors. He says that when something is easier to cut, then you have a lot less fatigue on your hands and on your arms. And this really helps people who are cutting several layers of fabric or who are cutting thicker fabrics, which I do all the time because I cut fleece and felt for making dolls and toys. Kai is a global manufacturer. They are based in Japan and they make over 10,000 different products. All of them are scissors and knives and shears and various kinds of products that cut things. Head over to kaiscissors.com where you can check out their full range of products and also get free shipping on everything within the United States. So that's kaiscissors.com. Go check them out. Thank you so much, Kai Scissors. And now back to my conversation with Taylor. And then what did it give you? I mean, it sounds like you ended up absolutely loving it and it sort of gave you a lot. And,
Absolutely.
And then it gave you a pattern business. So
Totally.
sort of talk about that as well.
So, as I kept teaching more and more, I got more and more comfortable with it. And something about, there's a lot of different facets of it. So I'll just get into the main ones. One of them is I love to empower people. When people feel uncomfortable or self-conscious, I mean, it can be anything like feeling uncomfortable with your body or with your skills or feeling like you're not creative or feeling like you need, some sort of outlet as a way to like make yourself feel good. There's a million different things that that sewing can bring to people's lives, right?
Yeah.
Ways that it can be, therapeutic or empowering or exciting or fun. And so I started pretty quickly to really kind of hone in on that experience that people were having. And because I was focusing on clothing, it was mostly that experience of not having things that fit and wanting to make clothing so that you could actually wear something that fits you and that you feel comfortable and confident in. And so, as I was teaching, I really connected to that in people. And, I'm the kind of person where, and I don't know if this is how I was raised or just what kind of person I am, I'm very empathic and being of service is really important to me. So teaching was like the perfect way to do the craft that I loved, right? And really immerse myself in that process and also help other people get the same joy out of it. So it was like this beautiful combination of getting to do the thing that I love and also helping people at the same time, which is like, who doesn't want a job like that?
Right.
You know what I mean? So as I was working on that, along with having the support of this indie fabric shop, right? I was looking at all these sewing patterns. And I remember early in the days of indie patterns when it was pretty much just Colette and maybe a handful of other ones.
Like
2013 or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was right around that time when I had been teaching for a couple years. And even like early 2010s kind of time period.
A little earlier, yeah.
I was thinking a lot about that. I thought, could I do this? Could I make sewing patterns and kind of use it as a way for me to create my own designs and bring some of my teaching philosophies into a little package that anybody can consume, right? Because I can't travel. I mean, it'd be cool to travel all over the world teaching classes, but I'm kind of a homebody and I don't love flying, so I don't think I'm doing that anytime soon, although I do love to go teach an occasional class somewhere else. I wanted to be able to share the little insights and things that I'd picked up with people. And I also wanted to create patterns that had that sort of conceptual, historical thing that I was so attracted to. Like there were a lot of patterns that felt like it was sort of like what you would want to buy in a store and then just how you make it. And I wanted like a little more. Like I wanted a little story. I wanted a little concept, a little bit of that art to come into it.
Yeah, right. You come from an art background and there are quite a few patterns in the market now, and there's definitely a place for them where it's like you feel like you go into Madewell, right? And you see the Madewell tank top, and then this is the pattern, the home sewing pattern version of that. And that's awesome. I mean,
I agree.
Right?
I've
then
made
you
plenty
make
of those types of things.
Yeah, me too. I mean, that's probably the first few patterns that I made. There's definitely a place for that. But you had an idea for something that was going to be somewhat different from that.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes from, my background in art of making a lot of, towards the end of my college and early, when I was doing all that retail stuff, I was making art and being in exhibitions and stuff and making a lot of projects that were sort of educational and interactive. And that interactivity was always really important to me, and that story and that narrative and that, learning things that you didn't know before. I'm a big history buff. One of the things I teach is history of fashion. And I've just always loved that kind of stuff. And so, I come from books and zines and those kinds of things that are like these little bits of information. I just kind of love eating up information. A weird way to finish a hem, the story of why a certain thing was called what it was, like where that came about. And so when I made my patterns, it was, I think, half about making a garment that someone could make, the actual sewing part, and then the other part, like, how do I turn this into an art project, a conceptual art project with like a story? So all of my patterns have like a little story about the history of the type of building that inspired it. And so that was like really important to me going into it.
Right. And so they started as zines, which is really cool. And it's just for people, I mean, it's hard to believe that, maybe people might not know what a zine is.
Totally.
Because I feel like zines were blogs before there were blogs.
Totally. Absolutely.
But if you could just explain what a zine is,
sure.
and then what your early patterns were like and how they were like a zine.
So a zine is basically a self-published magazine that people made as sort of the DIY equivalent to these big polished magazines. It's like the little indie boutique of magazines. And nowadays you see a lot more small independent magazines focusing on these things that are glossy and, really well produced. But at the time, if you wanted to circulate information, and especially information outside of what was accepted, zines in a lot of ways were a way for people who were outside of the status quo to circulate information to each other, whether that was, information about like health or LGBTQ stuff or, any kind of thing that's on the margins that doesn't have a lot of writing about it. And especially at that time, if we're talking like 90s, early 2000s, did not, right?
Right.
So it was a way for people to share information with each other in a sort of like pen pal kind of way, but without having to go through the conduits of like a large scale publication. So I kind of got into zines because when I was really into book arts in college, and I was always really into collage, and I made a lot of zine type things when I was in high school too, and I was certainly very interested in them. And when I went to college, I started experimenting with making zines that were specifically about some of the art theory that I was reading and kind of taking it apart and taking it out of an academic context, which has been a little bit of a theme through my life of taking these sort of conceptual academic things and then taking them out of that context and trying to make them accessible to anybody. So some of my early zines were about a question, right? A theoretical question I would pose, and I would have all of my friends in art school write a little article about it, and then also making things like zines about actually like making stuff. We did a zine for a wedding, like we made a commemorative zine for a wedding
awesome.
that I think is in the collection of the museum school's like zine library.
Love it.
So and when I started conceptualizing these patterns, they really started out as zines. And I ended up actually making pattern zines later on after I'd made the initial, regular packaged paper patterns. But I have on my computer, I look back to them the other day, I have all these early iterations before I actually launched my patterns, and they were just zines. Like they were booklets that walked you through the process of drafting a pattern and then stitching it up and had all these little illustrations and anecdotes and stuff. So I sort of came into this pattern making process. Like I didn't want to recreate the big four envelope tissue paper thing. And so I think I ended up sort of somewhere in between where I lost a lot of the content that comes with a zine, but I still kept the story. I kept the very detailed instructions. I kept the hand-drawn illustrations, which I still do to this day, but I do them on the computer so they're more legible. And I also had the cover designed by a different artist each time I did it. I've since changed that for a number of different reasons, but the first 3 patterns I worked with an artist friend to create the cover for. So that's kind of how the kind of zine trajectory worked its way into the sewing patterns. And I did end up, later I've made actually a couple zines that are patterns. So I want to keep doing that. I have a couple in my head. So I've kind of returned to that a little bit.
And talk a little bit about the name Blueprints.
Mm-hmm.
So the inspiration for connecting the patterns to architecture.
So I have always been kind of like a weird architecture nerd. I have no experience in architecture. I don't really have any formal training in it. I always thought of myself as kind of an outsider architect. Like I have this sort of understanding of what architecture is, but it's very much my own imagined kind of thing. And since then I've done a lot of reading and research about it, and now I'm much more informed about it. But I was the kid who instead of drawing pictures of like dragons and stuff, I would do blueprints for my dream house. I have like all of these different, I wish I still had them, but when I was a kid, that's all I'd do is I'd draw house blueprints and I'd draw furniture. And, if you'd known better, I might have gone into interior design or something like that, or architecture. So domestic spaces have always been really, really interesting to me, and specifically domestic spaces, right? I have memories of houses that I went to when I was a kid that still feel impactful to me. Going to visit my dad's friend in, I think in like Mill Valley outside of San Francisco, in this beautiful 70s wood sort of bohemian house with a spiral staircase and cobblestone floors. Like I remember this stuff in a really visceral way, and I can't quite explain what's so appealing to me about it. But when I was coming up with this idea for the pattern company, I kind of went immediately to that. I didn't even think about it. I was like, oh, obviously I'm going to make clothing that's inspired by domestic architecture. So I kind of played around with different ideas and eventually landed on this idea of a cabin pattern. I'm like, okay, I'm going to start with like a really basic shift dress that has pockets, because everything has pockets. I think I only have one pattern that doesn't have pockets because it's a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So I always put pockets in everything. I'm obsessed. Just like a basic shift. Wanted it to kind of be something that anybody could make and have it be this little cabin inspired, like you're thinking about this little simple structure that can do a lot of different things and is cozy and is utilitarian. And so that was sort of where that evolved from. And they've just kind of, gone from there. I'll get interested in a particular piece of architecture. I'll start to think about the design process in terms of clothing and fashion, and then try to find something that hits at a really nice place in the middle.
And there's the one there's like a pullover sweatshirt that's like is it pronounced geodesic?
I'm not 100% sure. It's either geodesic or geodesic. Okay. And I say it both ways. I think it's like a tomato.
Okay, all right, yeah. So, but it's, one of those domes where it's like glass and it's divided up into sections, and the sweatshirt has that same sort of look to it.
Totally. So that one started out very conceptual. I was reading a lot about Buckminster Fuller and also about a commune in the 60s and 70s in Colorado called Drop City, which was their whole thing. It goes back to the repurposed materials. They were using old car parts to build these geodesic domes, and doing art and making these giant collaborative paintings. And eventually I think the community fell apart, as do most utopian communes. But I was really fascinated by it, and I'd been thinking a lot about, okay, can I take this modular concept and apply it to like something that everyone wears, like a sweatshirt, right? And just make
it's super mod and cool.
Yeah,
and you could color block that and it'd be amazing.
I've seen people make it. My favorite thing is when I see people just make it out of all their old t-shirts.
Yeah, totally.
With like prints and like text on them.
Just go for it.
Yeah, I have a friend who made one, like some of her like dad's old shirts were in it with like a weird logo on them. I've seen people do some super cool things with that pattern. It makes me really, really happy. Because again, it's like part of it was, Buckminster Fuller was big on like using kind of pre-made materials and trying to be thoughtful and sustainable before that was really a thing. And so, I wanted to make this scrappy sweatshirt so that people could use their scraps. So the process, the actual like mathematical geometry process of trying to actually get that to work as a pattern turned out to be far more complicated than I thought it did. But I landed on something that I feel like works pretty well. But it is just made out of all the same size triangle, just like the geodesic, or certain types. There's like several different types of geodesic domes, and ISO, now I'm going to forget, but certain formats where it's like triangle, then this size of triangle. They're not all exactly the same size. But for the purpose of this pattern, I tried to make all of the triangles the same size. So that you can kind of make it like any length. I actually saw someone make a dress. There's no dress version of the pattern, but all you do is just put more triangles on the bottom and you've got a dress.
Yeah. There's something very quilty about it as well.
That's the other thing,
Yeah.
totally. And you can tell who the quilters are by who really focuses on getting the points.
I want all my
matched
points
up.
lined up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Versus people are like, I'm not going to try.
care.
I don't want to match up the points. It's
Right.
hard. For those of you out there, if you've made the sweatshirt and you struggled with matching the points, it's hard.
It's hard.
It's okay. Life is a challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just part of life.
Right, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about social media then. So you do a really nice job on Instagram of taking pictures, selfies. I mean, a lot of, showing your outfits is about taking selfies
Totally.
And getting comfortable with that.
Yes.
But you do that and take pictures of what you're wearing and talk about how you're feeling and what you're wearing and, a lot of outfit pictures. So talk about how you do that, sort of the mechanics of it. Do you use a tripod? Is your husband taking these pictures or how are you getting these pictures taken? And then also about your own comfort level and your own feelings of seeing yourself that way and seeing people react to it and the kind of comments that you get and sort of responding to those comments and that sort of thing.
So it's a really interesting question. I'll just come out at the beginning and say that when I first launched this business and the prospect of posting pictures of myself and things came up, I was really, really self-conscious and I struggled a lot with it. And I would say that I have gotten much more comfortable with it, but I still feel self-conscious from time to time. So that's something like I've been doing it at this point. I think I started Blueprints in 2014. So it's been like 5 years of posting selfies of myself.
And
I still feel self-conscious sometimes. If I'm having a bad day or I feel like I'm not feeling comfortable in my skin, it's hard to post. But what I've found that's really interesting is that one of the things that I really like about Instagram is that people respond mostly pretty well to authenticity. And so, if I don't look that great in the picture by my own standards, probably no one else is going to think about that. And a lot of times I just get really nice comments from people. I'm very lucky, luckily I have no trolls that I'm not going to get anytime soon. Because I don't think I have enough followers for those numbers to work out, but maybe someday. But it is, it's a process of kind of self-acceptance. And as I've gotten older, I've been working on this project for long enough that I've sort of matured as a human, right? I've gotten more comfortable with seeing pictures of myself and being okay with taking a picture of myself that I don't think looks really that good. And maybe making it part of the conversation. I can't remember if it was recently. I feel like the other day I posted something where I was like, I really want to show you my outfit, but I super badly need a haircut and I don't really look that great in this picture, but here's my outfit. And it's I think people can relate to that because a lot of people feel like that.
Sure.
We don't all live polished, lives that are Instagrammable. And I think that most people don't. But some people are really good at creating that for the camera. It's that performance thing again, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
So
and people often ask me how did you get used to hearing the sound of your own voice? And I'm just I just don't.
Yeah.
I just do what I need to do to get the podcast made because I really like having a podcast.
Yeah, totally.
And so I don't, I just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I just do what I need to do because I like to do this. And that's
Totally.
about all it is.
Totally.
And I put it out there and, this is how my voice
for the
sounds.
best. Totally.
Exactly. What can I do?
I think about that. It's so funny because when I hear podcasts with people that I've never heard speak, there's always that interesting moment where you go, oh, that's what that person sounds like.
Well, I have that as well.
Yeah.
I invite a guest on and you absolutely never know what that person sounds
totally.
like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I have that thing. I'm probably not going to listen to this for months after we record it. There's certain actors who won't watch movies that they've been in.
Right.
There's something I think about the human condition
hard.
of that. It's just it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's culturally, if we've sort of if it's a construct that we've created where we're not supposed to like what we sound like. I don't know. Could be anything. Or it could be something
but
else.
part of running a business that's based on your own fashion sense is putting your pictures of yourself wearing your clothes
you have to be
on Instagram.
You have to be sort of a brand ambassador. You have to be the face of your business.
You do.
And I've watched other people, and I think this is a good strategy and probably works for a lot of people, separate their personal accounts from their business account. And part of the reason I
know Sari did that.
Yep. A lot of people have done that. And then I also know people that haven't done that. That they've kept it kind of mixed together.
Yeah.
I've sort of opted to keep it mixed together because, I don't know, I like to keep it real. The polished thing, like I've mentioned before, never feels too good for me. I feel like I want so much of what I do is about personal connection. And so I want people who buy my patterns to know that I'm there and that I'm making them and that I'm making them out of love for them And so I want there to be that connection, even if we never meet, even if they never leave a comment, or, I send them a pattern, I never hear from them or anything. Like, just the fact that it's like a human connection thing is really important to me.
Right. So are you doing this now full-time, Blueprints? The combination between teaching and the pattern company and sort of all the different things related to the sewing business full-time, or do you have another job that you're also doing that's sort of unrelated?
So that it's teaching and doing Blueprints.
Okay.
I do Blueprints half of the time, and then the other half of the time I'm teaching. And in the last couple of years, I've gone much more, almost like not full-time, but sort of on a college professor level. I'm teaching 3 courses a semester, which is, a pretty full course
And you're
load.
teaching not just are you still at JP?
I'm not teaching at
so
JP
you're teaching,
Stitch
tell us
anymore.
where you're teaching now.
So I teach at Bay State College. They have a fashion department, fashion design and merchandising. I've been there for about 3 years. And I'm also teaching a couple of classes at a place down where I live, at a fabric store called the Franklin Mill Store. I have a long-term Thursday morning group, wonderful, almost like a social group at this point, wonderful women. And then I have an evening class. I tend to do an evening class at the Elliott School in JP, which has been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah, that's a school
Literally,
for crafts.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do art, woodworking, photography, sewing, all kinds of different crafts. It's a wonderful place.
And what are you teaching at the Elliott School?
The Elliott School, I have 2 classes that I do, and then I'll throw in kind of like a wild card class periodically. I've got a clothing design introduction class, and I designed it to be sort of a crash course in clothing design for people who don't have any formal education but who like sewing, to learn a little bit of pattern making, a little bit of fitting, a little bit of construction, and basically you go from a sketch to a garment that they've created. So it's kind of a unique course that kind of crams everything together. And I've been doing that for years, and it's pretty fun. And I always get like the greatest group of people. The Elliott School gets the greatest students.
Yeah, I'm on their mailing list. It's so enticing.
Wonderful people. And so then I do a follow-up class, which is just an open workshop clothing sewing class. And so people will kind of take that, and sometimes people will come back next year and take it again. And it's just a workshop for people to troubleshoot clothing patterns, or alter things that they've made, or come up with their own patterns. It's kind of just a catch-all kind of class. So, that's what I do there. And then at Bay State, I teach a lot of their foundation design courses, so pattern making and clothing construction. Like I said before, I teach history of fashion. I also, this year I taught CAD pattern making, which was really fun. So using computer-aided software to make patterns. I've taught all kinds of different classes. I teach draping there, but I love, they're great. They're awesome students.
Yeah.
I love those students.
Right. So
I love all my students.
This really launched into a real teaching, a real teaching career for
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
And at the present, I can't talk about it too much. It's still in development, but we're putting together, the school is creating, my colleague and I kind of, developed it, but sort of like an incubator program for the fashion design students to launch their lines, to kind of get their pieces into production.
This is at Bay State.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's a new program. It'll start in the fall. I'm sort of working and continuing to develop it in the present and over the summer. And we're starting in the fall, and it should be really cool. I'm really excited about it. Because there's not really a program like that anywhere in the region.
That's super cool. And I know you had mentioned that you had organized like a slow fashion event, and you sent me some pictures that were really cool, and that you are going to do it again.
Yeah, we're going to try to do it again.
It looked really neat. So tell us a little bit about that.
So over the school year, the school year before this one, all my students were doing their senior collections, and they were doing designs, and I sketch stuff all the time, and I make stuff for myself all the time, and I'll make little capsule wardrobes. Part of the reason I never became a fashion designer is just because I'm more into the art of it. I'm into the teaching part, the history, the research, and I just never went the route to like release a collection, right? So I thought, like, I want to do a collection, and it'll be sort of like a conceptual art piece, but I want to have a fashion collection, have it walk the runway, and do something kind of different with it. So I started sketching and kind of researching materials. I wanted to work with all sustainable or recycled materials, but it ended up sort of being both. And what happened is it was very serendipitous. It evolved into meeting cool people and starting to collaborate with them. I collaborated with a wonderful natural dyer based out of Somerville named Amy Lustein, who has a wonderful classroom space there. Also collaborated with a really cool boutique called Practice Space in Cambridge, who does a lot of design research and research about community projects. So, we all kind of gelled, and I met all these other cool artists and designers and clothing designers, and it just kind of grew into this fun event where I did a fashion show. And I styled it because I didn't have enough of my own stuff for like a full fashion show. It ended up having about 25 looks, but I kind of supplemented with pieces from other designers who were featured, the boutique that I talked about, and a couple other clothing designers who also had little booths. We did sort of like a craft market out of it as well.
That's neat.
So it was a fashion show, craft market, and just sort of a general social event. And so it was kind of an experiment. I was like, can I do this event on slow fashion that feels like sort of a community event, is inspiring to people, brings different artists and designers together to collaborate, and with this sort of slow fashion, sustainability
theme.
Yeah. Exactly. Kind of, because I was thinking about joining in Boston Fashion Week, and I was like, can I just do like the anti-Boston Fashion Week? Which, not anything against Fashion Week, but it was just like, I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So we're thinking about doing it again this year. I keep saying thinking because I'm like, I want to make sure I can actually make it work before I commit 100%. But we are going to try to do it again this year, maybe with some other designers than myself showing collections, and some more educational things like maybe putting together a panel discussion, having a clothing swap, all of these things that fit under the slow fashion header. If we're thinking of just slow fashion being a more thoughtful, a more ethical, environmentally conscious, more inclusive look at what fashion can be. How can fashion empower people? How can it respect the environment? How can it bring people together? So sort of taking that thesis and making an event out of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Part 2. So we'll see how
it
goes.
Yeah, it definitely has potential to become something more established. That sounds terrific.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. And I want to make sure we get to your recommendations, but before we do that, I definitely have to ask you about being a drummer in an indie rock band after college.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so funny. Yeah. So when I was in art school, I met a couple friends and played in a folk duo with a friend for a long time. Like I said, my parents are both musicians.
It makes sense.
I kind of went away from it and then came back to it when I was in college and taught myself how to play the drums and joined this sort of psychedelic indie rock band, which, funny enough, was called Quilt.
No way! Is it still around? No?
They're not still around, but two of the members, all of the members are in different bands now that are all wonderful. But you can still, they put out a couple records. I only did the first record with them. I sort of took off and did my sewing thing after the first record. But yeah, that's still part of my practice. I love playing the drums. I do it periodically. If I need a break from the sewing machine, I just go hit the drums.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really good break. A really good, totally. Different.
It's a good counterpoint.
Yeah, exactly.
All
right. So I want to make sure we get to your list and of recommendations. So the first thing you wanted to recommend is a place that I have been, although it was a number of years ago. I can't remember how many years, maybe 10 years ago. But you wanted to recommend visiting the Gropius house in Lincoln, which is an absolutely beautiful.
It's awesome.
An incredible place to tour.
It's so cool. And, I doubt it's changed much since you were there.
Yeah, I'm sure it hasn't.
It's the same.
Yeah. It's a protected historic site.
Totally. So I'm obsessed with historical houses. I go to historical houses wherever I go. And this one holds a special place in my heart because the story behind it is so cool. And the Bauhaus philosophy, this idea of everything being part of an artwork and design as being, that our lives should have things that are designed that are both functional and have beautiful form. So it's like the marriage of those two things. Without getting into a whole, history of art, Bauhaus kind of thing. But the Gropius house, which is in Lincoln, Massachusetts, it's kind of out north suburbs. It's so cool. So when the Bauhaus was disbanded during World War II, right? Gropius and his wife Isa and many of the other members of Bauhaus basically left to escape the Nazis. And Gropius got an appointment at Harvard. So he was going to be teaching at Harvard. And some of his friends and benefactors basically banded together because they had to get out of there with nothing and loaned him some money to build a house in Lincoln and some land. And so they built this beautiful house. It's very modest. It's small. It's, I think, a 3-bedroom house. I feel like it's the same square footage as my house, which is very small. And he did this beautiful thing where he combined the vernacular architecture of New England, which he was really interested in, which is very different than Germany, Bauhaus era Germany and Bauhaus design in general. And he took all these elements and he combined them in these beautiful ways, like using colonial house siding as a decorative element on the inside of the house. So if if you ever get a chance to go, and his office is still set up, and his wife was amazing. Like she sort of took on this role of being like Mrs. Bauhaus and spoke about the idea. She helped him in his architecture practice. She wore incredible things. She made her own jewelry and hats. So I'd love to really learn more about her. There's not a lot of writing about Isa Gropius, but that's kind of on my list of things to read about. So anyway, if you get a chance ever to go to the Gropius house and just to look at it, it's so like relatable, but it's also a beautiful example of design. Mm-hmm. That's what's so powerful about it, I think. Like, it could be like anybody's house.
Yeah, totally. It's super cool. And they have open tours, and I went in the evening, I remember. So it was like lit at night. It was super cool.
Yeah.
So definitely worth making an appointment or finding out when it's open and going if you're in the Boston area. It's not too far from Boston.
No, it's probably like, 45 minutes outside of the city. Yeah.
Totally worth going. All right, and you brought a book
yes, I did.
Called Nomadic Furniture.
I did.
So tell us about this book and why you like it.
So I discovered this book when I was in college, and this was, again, when I was sort of in I'm kind of obsessed with architecture, but I don't know what it is. I'm relating to it in weird ways. And I used to just go to the library and just look at the stacks and just see what books were there. Like, that was something that I did a lot, and I still kind of do. Actually, I love libraries. And I saw the spine of this book. I'm like, Nomadic Furniture. That sounds so cool. And I pulled it out, and it's an entirely handwritten, like a zine, essentially, like a published zine.
Okay.
If you look, it's all about,
it's all like written in handwriting.
If anybody's ever seen the Moosewood Cookbook,
oh yes,
which
exactly.
Is like
that's what it reminds me of. Yes,
it's all handwritten. There's lots of beautiful illustrations, but like kind of cut and paste photographs.
They
too.
do not make books like this.
No,
anymore.
they really don't. They really don't. So I want to make books like this.
Yeah, although they should.
But it's all about making your own furniture, and it has it was put out in I want to say like 75 or something. So it has a very modern aesthetic. And it's very conceptual, and it's these, there's one section that are these kind of like living cubes that are different cubes that you build that you set up for different purposes if you had a big warehouse space or something. And there's just a section that's like, here are things you can find out in the world to make bookshelves out of, like orange crates, milk crates, just a whole section on that. Like, here's how to make a light fixture out of an old gallon jug of milk. So it's very DIY. But it's DIY in this way that like elevates it to like an art form, which is really appealing to me. And I've built several of the furniture pieces out of this book. It's just really cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and you can still find copies of it. It's out of print, but
yeah, sure.
I've found copies on Amazon. It's not expensive. Yeah. If you're at all interested in building DIY furniture and you need a break from Pinterest, I would highly recommend this Nomadic Furniture book. And there's a Nomadic Furniture too. There's like a second, like a next, a sequel or whatever.
Right.
Too,
okay,
so.
That's super cool. And your last recommendation is color wheels.
Okay. So I don't remember any of my formal color theory from college, but I've recently gotten really into color theory because I taught a class a couple semesters ago that was about creating branding and logos. And so I was like, I need to go back and like relook at my color theory. And I just got so excited about color schemes, like, complementary colors and analogous colors. And once you really get into the fundamentals of that, I've been really into using it to put together outfits and to make color combinations for graphic design things. They're really simple. It's like complementary colors or a triad or analogous colors. It's like this cute little formula that you can use. So, complementary colors are like red and green, right? Orange and blue and yellow and purple. It's so simple. It's so fundamental. And you can kind of, like, I love making an outfit where I put together like orange and blue garments.
I never thought about it
work
for dressing.
Yeah. I'm like, why does this outfit look so good? I'm like, because it's complementary colors.
Right.
So it's a nice little strategy. If anyone's feeling like their wardrobe needs a little shake up or they want to put things together that they wouldn't have expected, I recommend complementary colors. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to do bright orange, bright blue. You can do like robin's egg blue and rusty orange. Or you can do, I love olive green and rose. Because that's red and green, but it's not like your Christmas stocking red and green.
Yeah,
so
that's a great idea.
Fun. I've just been really into that lately.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask you about your anxiety necklace. Mm-hmm. So you're wearing this necklace that has, it's gold, a gold chain, and it just has the word anxiety in a very sort of like dainty like script. And I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
My oldest daughter suffers from anxiety, and I'm totally going to get it for her.
Oh,
so
you
tell
should.
me
It's
where
wonderful.
It came from.
So this came from a company called Bandeau. And
yes, I love Bandeau.
They did a collaboration. I can't remember who it was with, but they created these necklaces, and all of the proceeds go to a group called Bring Change to Mind, which is dedicated to ending stigmatization around mental illness. So I've had general anxiety since I was a kid. It's been really challenging for me at different times of my life. I'm in a good place with it now, but there's been other times where I haven't. And especially because I'm a teacher, I'm in a place where I'm interacting with people all the time. I think they designed the necklace to be a conversation starter.
Yeah.
And it's functioned as that for me, to be able to be open with people about my anxiety. I think it would
function
with my
that way for her as well, which is why I want to get it, because
totally.
I mean, she's really great about advocating for herself, and
that's awesome.
She's really open about it. She'll talk to anybody about it, which is why I think it would work for her. I think for some people who maybe are more shy about it, it wouldn't work. But for her, she's like, so open about it. Let's talk about it. That's exactly. Great. So I think if she was wearing that necklace, it would just be a great way for her to talk about it more.
And it's almost like a little talisman. You know? Like when I have it on, it's like a way to kind of check in with myself and see, how I'm feeling. And I've had some really nice conversations with people that I might not have otherwise opened up to, and vice versa. So it's really quite nice.
I love that. Yeah, totally. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for coming to visit me and for talking to me about your career and about all the different things that you do. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And you've been listening to the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Visit my blog, whileshenaps.com, where you can sign up for my email newsletter to get the best in sewing, blogging, and small business delivered right to your inbox each week. Today's episode was sponsored by Kai Scissors. Kai Scissors are the premier sewing, quilting, tailoring, and craft scissors available today. Made of hardened stainless steel, they are smooth, light, and offer fatigue-free cutting for all of your cutting needs. Kai Manufacturing has been making quality cutting blades for over 100 years. So remember, all orders on kaiscissors.com have free shipping inside the United States. That's KAI Scissors.com. Thank you so much, Kai Scissors. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.